everyone, I'm Lida. So I do product management. I wear a consulting hat half of the day, and then the other half of the day I wear a coaching hat. And all of the time I wear an ADHD hat, and I only got that diagnosis at the age of 38. So turns out I had over 3 decades of self-coping mechanisms and things that I was working on that worked well. So it's definitely a passion area of mine. And that's why I want to share with you all how I can see and how I hope you see neurodiversity as an asset or even a superpower. Okay, so I always like to have an agenda, like what are we going to talk about today? And since if I'm blocking the slides, you can also sign up for the summary of the slides on my Substack, lidat.substack.com. I send maximum 1 email a month, so I will be very respectful of your inbox because my inbox is also very full. But yeah, if you'd like the slides, that's the easiest way to get them, or just watch the recording. And yeah, what we'll be talking about is understanding neurodiversity, redefining success for you and for others in your life, if neurodiversity is something that is present in their lives, and embracing your neurospicy brilliance. All right, so just with a show of hands, is everyone familiar with neurodiversity, what that means? Okay, it's like half the room, so I'm glad I have this section. Okay, so the gist of it is neurodiversity means that you have a differently wired brain. So we've had, same or more or less the same hardware in our brains for 10,000 plus years as a species. We're pretty much wired to think as if they're saber-toothed tigers that are about to chase us, which thankfully no longer is the case. But it's a very old piece of hardware in our brains. So I caveat by saying, there's behavioral traits that neurotypical and neurodiverse people might share these days, because there's over 8 billion people in the world. And I had to search this morning, but guess how many people have a phone of those 8 billion people? A phone, a mobile phone. Almost, yeah, it's like 5.4 billion people have a mobile phone, which is wild if you think about, there's a lot of places where people are living on less than $1 a day. So all this to say, I caveat because I've heard the saying, oh, everyone has ADHD, or like everyone's on the spectrum. And I feel like that could be very invalidating for some people. So we might have the same behavioral traits, which might be that there might be a lot of people who struggle with focus, struggle with attention. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're neurodiverse. And it also is not better or worse to be neurotypical or neurodiverse. It's just that if you have a neurodiverse brain, you literally have a differently wired brain than the neurotypical brain. And yeah, if you're neurodiverse, it doesn't mean you have attention deficit in the case of ADHD. It's just that you probably spend your attention in different ways. So one way I can think of to say it is, with neurodiverse folks, we tend to struggle with executive function. So an easy analogy for that is if you think of it as like the command center of your brain, or even an easier analogy is like the CEO of your brain. So for neurodiverse folks, it might be that the CEO is very disorganized or seemingly disorganized because we're all living in a neurotypical world. So it's all about realizing that CEOs, it's not so much that it's disorganized, it's just that you can actually turn that and flip the table and make it into innovative thinking, into out-of-the-box thinking, into creativity, problem-solving skills. So that's my passion is like reframing what that looks like, and embracing your neurodiversity can definitely unlock potential in yourself and in others. So let's talk about what success looks like. So I like to, I'm a big fan of studies. My undergrad was in biomed, and I was pre-med and all that jazz. I went to business school after just to appease my parents because I didn't go to med school or law school, even though I got in, and all that. So I will say this is by no means a scientific sample, but a lot of studies that have been done, and large majority of studies that have been done for neurodiversity have been done for boys and men exclusively. So they extrapolated that data to all people, and that's why when I went as a teenager to a doctor in Canada, and I said, I'm pretty sure I have ADD, because at the time that's what it was called. And she asked me like a few questions, and because I was an A student, she was like, oh, there's no way you have ADD, because the studies at the time showed you had to be acting out, you had to be very disruptive in class, you were like, your energy was all over the place because again, the large majority of those studies were done on boys and men. And it turns out the easiest analogy I can give you is for most people with ADHD, if you're a man with ADHD, it tends to be you direct the energy out. A lot of us women tend to direct the energy in. So it could be our brains are like, and our thoughts are like all over the place. And again, it's not for everybody, but that's like a easy way to think about it, why it presents so differently. So I was curious about that. So I asked my network, do you have ADHD? And a couple hundred people responded. And what was interesting is roughly a third, it was 36% that said yes. Roughly a third said no. So there was 18% that said no. 19% said no, but the ... was I have a family member or a loved one that has ADHD. And a third of people were like, maybe? I don't know. So all this to say, it doesn't mean that all these people out of the woodwork are now like becoming neurodiverse. It's just that a lot of us didn't get the diagnosis because they were trying to put us into a certain bucket that we didn't fit in, if that makes sense. So most of my talk is going to be focused on ADHD just because that's my lived experience, but neurodiversity could also be dyslexia, being on the spectrum, so like ASD, it could be various other things. So realizing that we can actually leverage that concentration and that focus in a productive way. We can embrace our out-of-the-box thinking and channel our high energy into passion projects. So my husband and I actually co-own a coffee farm, and this was like my product hat, which as a software person, I'm sure you all appreciate. I was like, oh, how hard could it be to grow cacao? I'm like, next door in Guatemala, because the farm is in El Salvador, I was like, they're growing cacao. It can't be that hard. So, as someone I think without ADHD, they might be like, this is such a dumb question. But it turned out that channeling that kind of like out of the box thinking worked really well. We planted a few thousand, cacao plants, and a few years later, we have our cacao harvest. So that's just one example of ways that I wear a lot of hats, and I think it's actually due to my strengths as someone with ADHD. I don't think I would probably want to be a coach and a consultant and, have this farm life on the side that hopefully I'll retire to one day had I not had ADHD. So that's one thing that you can definitely notice, that neurodiverse folks tend to channel our high energy into passion projects. I will also caveat by saying if you're not in a place where you feel safe, none of this is possible. So a Google study was done and showed that the number one thing that helped folks in a work environment was feeling psychologically safe. And I think that goes beyond even the work environment. So if you feel like you're safe, if you feel like you belong, then you could really flex into that feeling of oh, I'm a neurodiverse individual, and I can actually be my full self at work. And this is something that with clients as of last year, I actually tell them I have ADHD. And prior to that, A, I didn't know, but B, I probably wouldn't have told them because, I wasn't necessarily in a place where I felt that sense of belonging. So I will caveat by saying, you can build your confidence and, collaborate with folks and really lean into the fact that the way you think differently is actually an asset and not a curse. And for everyone, whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, I'm a self-professed comparison queen. I used to compare myself to everyone else, and I was pre-med, and I would notice oh wow, all these other friends I have can study way fewer hours and get the same grades, and they must be smarter than me. I must not be as smart. I mean, I would just try harder, and then I would get the same outcomes. But what I learned from that the hard way that I love to share with you is to try not to have that measuring stick against other people. If anything, you're just comparing yourself to yourself. And how you could be better. So yes, success is definitely a personal journey, and I'm a big fan of SMART goals, but I caveat the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound by saying the goal that's fully in your control. Because I think also neurodiverse people, we tend to maybe try to tackle too much, and then we set SMART goals, but they're not so smart because things are not necessarily in our control. It could be oh, I want to get a new job by next quarter. And it's cool, but that's not fully in your control. So maybe you could change it to, oh, I will, apply to 3 jobs or companies every month until I get a new job, So just and I think that's relevant for neurotypical folks as well, is to definitely just set SMART goals and see that success is a personal journey, and ideally don't define that by the expectations of others. And you can leverage others. So like body doubling is something that works really well for folks who are neurodiverse. So even having a friend come, if you're really, like, I don't know, not good with keeping your house clean or something, you could actually have a friend come over and say like, hey, would you be okay with like us hanging out and I'm like talking to you, but I'm also cleaning the house? That's something that works. There's so many different communities now that allow you to get that body doubling experience while you do your focused work. So I'm part of one, so I can definitely, share. I have a bunch of tips for this, but just not the time to do it today. And also definitely acknowledge and celebrate your wins, no matter how small they are. Whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, I think back every day that you're able to even achieve one of your goals. And embracing your neurospicy brilliance, I think the way that I've been able to do it more is just to realize things that are very obvious, but we might forget as neurodiverse people, which is, have you slept well? Have you eaten lately? Have you become hydrated lately? Have you moved, or have you been in front of like the same computer screen for 8 hours? Have you breathed deeply lately? So these are very obvious questions that sometimes clients, like if I ask them, they're like, oh yeah, it turns out, I'm on ADHD medication or some other medication and I haven't drank water all day and that dehydrates me. So there's like very simple things you could do to actually, be your best self at work, at home, in life. And for me, it's like, what used to be a big fan of like doing big like meditation retreats for like 10 or 11 days and you meditate like 10 hours a day. Like I was doing extreme things for mindfulness. And now it's closer to 10 minutes a day, and that's more than enough because it helps me reduce like stress and definitely increases like emotional regulation. So that's something that I think is, again, goes for everybody, and definitely for neurodiverse folks like me. And lastly, I would say, if you remember nothing else from this, practice self-compassion. Like, we're all humans, we're all gonna make mistakes, and just realize that you're not gonna meet all the goals, you're not gonna do all the things, but if you practice self-compassion, you're gonna build that inner strength, your emotional resilience, that will support network to help you navigate the difficult times that are bound to happen in life. So thank you so much, and feel free to join me on LinkedIn if you want to connect.